The Galactic Military Academy on Kepler 442b was known throughout 7 star systems for producing the finest warriors in the galaxy. Its crystalline towers pierced the purple sky, and within its halls the most promising young beings from dozens of species learned the arts of war, strategy, and combat. But in the deepest levels of the Academy, behind reinforced titanium walls and energy barriers that could withstand a star's heat, something waited in darkness. Commander Vexhai, a towering Zephyrian with scales that shimmered like oil on water, stood before the massive containment chamber. Her forearms moved in practiced gestures as she input the security codes, each digit glowing briefly on the holographic interface. Beside her, General Korthak of the Draconian Empire watched with his reptilian eyes fixed on the sealed door. "Are you certain this is necessary?" General Korthak asked, his forked tongue tasting the air nervously. "The creature has been contained for 3 cycles now. Perhaps we should continue with conventional training methods." Commander Vexhai's antenna twitched with amusement. "General, your own report stated that our graduates are becoming too comfortable. They lack the primal fear response that kept our ancestors alive. This exercise will remind them that the universe still holds terrors beyond their imagination." The containment chamber was a marvel of engineering. Energy fields layered upon energy fields created a prison that had once held a creature that destroyed 3 colonies before it was captured. The beast inside was known only through whispered legends and classified reports. Some called it the Shadow of Worlds. Others named it the Planet Eater's spawn. Scientists had classified it as Species X7, but everyone who had seen it in action simply called it Death. As the final security barrier disengaged, a low rumble echoed from within the chamber. The sound vibrated through the reinforced floor and into the bones of every being present. Emergency lights bathed the corridor in crimson, and automated warnings began their urgent chorus. "Beginning containment breach simulation," announced the Academy's AI in its perfectly modulated voice. "All students report to designated safe zones." "This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Throughout the Academy, alarms shrieked their warnings. Students from across the galaxy dropped their studies and rushed to their assigned positions. Tentacled Aquarians slithered through the corridors alongside bipedal Nexans, their different physiologies united in purpose. The insectoid klaxons clicked their mandibles nervously, while the gaseous ethereals dimmed their natural luminescence to avoid detection. In Training Hall 7, a group of final-year students huddled behind energy barriers. Among them stood Marcus Chen, a human exchange student who had somehow earned his place through a series of tests that had left many of his classmates baffled. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, and their inclusion in the Academy's programs remained controversial. "What do you think they've released?" whispered Zerani, a blue-skinned Aldebarian whose telepathic abilities made her one of the most feared students in psychological warfare classes. Marcus shrugged, checking his standard-issue plasma rifle. "Whatever it is, I'm sure we can handle it. That's what we've been training for." Several alien students exchanged glances. The humans' calm confidence was either admirable or suicidal. Most species that achieved space travel had learned to respect the ancient predators that lurked in the dark between stars. Humans, it seemed, had not yet developed this healthy fear. Deep in the Academy's bowels, the creature stirred. For 3 years, it had remained dormant, sustained by the facility's life support systems but showing no signs of consciousness. The scientists who studied it had begun to wonder if it was truly alive, or merely some form of sophisticated organic technology left behind by a vanished civilization. The creature's first movement was subtle. Sensors detected a shift in temperature within the containment chamber. Then came a sound that had never been recorded in any xenobiology database, something between a purr and the grinding of tectonic plates. Whatever was inside was waking up. Emergency response teams mobilized throughout the Academy. Heavily armed security forces took positions at key choke points while automated defense systems came online. The Academy's shields strengthened, and all non-essential personnel received orders to evacuate to the orbital stations. But something was wrong. The creature's vital signs, displayed on monitors throughout the command center, showed none of the aggressive patterns recorded during its capture. Its heart rate, if it could be called that, remained steady. Its brain activity suggested not rage or hunger, but something else entirely, something the xenobiologists couldn't identify. Commander Vexhai frowned at the readings. This isn't matching the behavioral profiles from the Sigma incident. General Korthak's claws scraped against his ceremonial armor. Perhaps containment has weakened it. 3 years in stasis might have reduced its capabilities. Neither commander knew that in Training Hall 7, Marcus Chen was doing something that would have horrified them. While his classmates maintained their defensive positions, the human had begun to notice patterns in the emergency signals. The creature's location, its movement speed, the security responses, all of it painted a picture that didn't match the Academy's emergency protocols. This isn't random, Marcus murmured to himself, studying his tablet's display of the Academy's layout. It's moving with purpose but not toward populated areas. It's avoiding them. Above them, the Academy's automated systems tracked the creature's progress through the lower levels. Each sensor it passed remained intact. Each security door it encountered opened without being forced. The beast moved through the facility like it was exploring rather than hunting. Then came the moment that would change everything. The creature reached a junction where 3 corridors met, and for the first time since its containment began, it made a choice. To the left lay the primary armory. Straight ahead led to the main student dormitories. To the right was an abandoned storage area that hadn't been used in decades. The creature turned right. In the command center, alarms continued their relentless wailing. Commander Vexhi's 4 hands danced across multiple control panels as she tried to understand what they were dealing with. The beast's behavior defied every xenobiological model they possessed. It was almost as if the creature was curious rather than hostile. "Sir," called out Technician Moltar from his station. "The entity has stopped moving." "It's in Storage Bay 94. "What's in Storage Bay 94? General Korthak demanded. "According to records, nothing of strategic value. Old training equipment, some obsolete computer cores, and—" Moltar paused, his 6 eyes blinking in confusion. "A human cultural artifact, something called a piano." Marcus Chen, still studying the tactical displays in Training Hall 7, suddenly understood. While his alien classmates prepared for battle against an unstoppable killing machine, the human began to smile. Storage Bay 94 had been forgotten by most of the Academy's administration, buried deep in the facility's lower levels. It served as a dumping ground for items deemed too valuable to discard but too obsolete to use. Dust motes danced in the dim emergency, lighting as something massive moved through the shadows between towering shelves of abandoned equipment. The creature that the galaxy's military minds had designated as an apex predator moved with surprising grace among the stored items. Its form defied easy description. Part shadow, part substance, with appendages that seemed to shift between solid matter and something resembling liquid darkness. When it moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around it, as if space itself had to accommodate its presence. In the command center 3 levels above, Commander Vexhi stared at the sensor readings in disbelief. The entity has been stationary for 7 minutes. What is it doing? Technician Moltar's tentacles quivered as he adjusted the monitoring equipment. "Sir, the acoustic sensors are picking up something unusual. It sounds like—" He paused, his species' natural ability to interpret vibrations struggling with what he was detecting. "It sounds like music." General Korthak's reptilian features twisted in confusion. "Music? Your equipment must be malfunctioning." But deep in Storage Bay 94, something extraordinary was happening. The creature had discovered the old piano that had been donated by Earth's Cultural Exchange Program 5 years earlier. The instrument had been used briefly for interdisciplinary studies before being relegated to storage when budget cuts eliminated the arts programs. Massive appendages, each one capable of crushing titanium, touched the piano's keys with impossible delicacy. The creature's first attempt produced a single, pure note that resonated through the storage bay like a prayer. Then came another note and another, as the being that had terrorized 3 star systems began to explore the concept of harmony. Meanwhile, Marcus Chen had made a decision that would have court-martialed any other student. He disabled his communication device and slipped away from his assigned position in Training Hall 7. While his classmates maintained their defensive positions, the human navigated the Academy's service corridors. With the confidence of someone who had spent months studying the facility's layout, the Academy's emergency protocols were designed to contain threats, not to keep students in their safe zones. Marcus exploited this oversight, using maintenance shafts and service elevators to descend toward the lower levels. His understanding of human military doctrine gave him Insights that his alien instructors had never considered. Sometimes the best way to neutralize a threat was to understand it rather than destroy it. Back in Storage Bay 94, the creature had discovered something that no amount of military containment could have prepared it for. The piano responded to its touch in ways that were both foreign and familiar. Each key produced not just sound, but emotional resonance that the being had never experienced during its centuries of existence in the void between stars. The creature's species had no concept of art or music. They were born in the cold depths of space, sustained by cosmic radiation and the occasional consumption of stellar matter. Their existence was one of pure survival, driven by instincts older than most civilizations. But here, in this forgotten storage room, something new was awakening within the ancient predator. The melodies that emerged were unlike anything in galactic musical databases. They carried the loneliness of deep space, the weight of eons spent in isolation, and something else, a longing for connection that transcended species barriers. The creature's natural ability to manipulate gravitational fields allowed it to create harmonics that human ears could never detect, turning the simple piano into something approaching a cosmic instrument. 3 levels above, the acoustic sensors in Storage Bay 94 were overloading. Technician Moltar's readings showed sound frequencies that extended far beyond normal auditory ranges. Commander, I'm detecting gravitational fluctuations synchronized with the audio signatures. Whatever that thing is doing, it's affecting space-time itself. Commander Vexhi's 4 hands moved frantically across her control panels. Increase containment field strength around Storage Bay 94. If it's manipulating gravity, it might be preparing to break through the hull. But in Training Hall 7, the students were experiencing something unprecedented. Despite being separated from Storage Bay 94 by multiple levels and reinforced barriers, they could feel something. The music, transmitted through the Academy's structure itself, reached them as subtle vibrations that seemed to bypass their ears and speak directly to something deeper. Zarani, the telepathic Aldebarian, was the first to understand. Her psychic abilities allowed her to perceive the emotional content hidden within the mysterious sounds. It's not aggressive, she whispered to her companions. Whatever's making that music, it's not trying to hurt anyone. It's trying to communicate. Marcus Chen, meanwhile, had reached the service tunnel that ran directly above Storage Bay 94. Through a maintenance grate, he could see into the dimly lit storage area below. What he witnessed challenged everything the Academy had taught him about alien threats. The creature was massive, easily the size of a small starship, but it moved around the piano with the careful attention of a concert musician. Its dark, shifting form seemed to absorb the emergency lighting, creating an aura of shadow that made it difficult to focus on directly. But there was nothing threatening about its posture. If anything, the being seemed almost reverent as it explored the instrument's capabilities. The human watched in fascination as the creature's appendages found combinations of keys that created chords no human composer had ever imagined. The music that emerged spoke of vast distances traveled, of stars born and dying, of a loneliness so profound that it had shaped the very evolution of an entire species. Marcus understood something that the Academy's commanders did not. This wasn't a weapon that had gained sentience. This was an artist that had been mistaken for a monster. In the command center, alarms continued their urgent chorus. Sir, Technician Moltar reported, the gravitational distortions are spreading beyond Storage Bay 94. The entire lower level is experiencing minor space-time fluctuations. General Korthak's claws extended involuntarily. Prepare the emergency containment charges. If that thing destabilizes the Academy's foundation, we'll have to jettison the entire lower section. Commander Vexhi hesitated. The readings were unlike anything in their databases, but they weren't necessarily threatening. Wait. The fluctuations are rhythmic, synchronized with the acoustic signatures. It's not trying to escape or cause damage. It's expressing itself. Below them, Marcus Chen made a decision that would define the rest of his career. He opened the maintenance grate and dropped silently into Storage Bay 94, landing in a crouch behind a shelf of obsolete computer cores. The creature was less than 30 meters away, its attention completely focused on the piano. As Marcus moved closer, he realized that the being was aware of his presence but didn't perceive him as a threat. One of its appendages, something that might have been an eye or a sensory organ, tracked his movement briefly before returning to the keyboard. The creature was allowing him to approach. The music continued, each note carrying emotions that Marcus could feel in his bones. It was the sound of intelligence trapped in a form that the universe feared, of consciousness seeking connection across the vast emptiness between worlds. And for the first time since the Academy's emergency began, Marcus understood exactly what needed to happen next. Marcus Chen approached the massive creature with the same calm confidence he might show a nervous animal. Every instinct bred into his species over millions of years of evolution should have been screaming at him to run. But humans had always been peculiar among galactic species. Where others saw a predator, Marcus saw a being in pain. The creature's music paused as it became fully aware of the human's presence. What might have been a head turned toward Marcus, revealing sensory organs that glowed with a soft, deep blue light. For a moment that seemed to stretch across eternity, human and alien regarded each other in silence. Marcus slowly raised his hands, palms open, in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peaceful intent. "Hello," he said softly. "That was beautiful music. I've never heard anything like it." The being's response was immediate and startling. The gravitational fluctuations around it shifted, becoming more focused, more controlled. Sound waves that had been creating discordant harmonics suddenly aligned, and Marcus realized he was experiencing the creature's attempt at communication through music itself. 3 levels above, chaos reigned in the command center. The acoustic sensors were detecting patterns in the gravitational distortions that suggested complex information exchange. Commander Vexhi's 4 hands moved frantically across multiple control panels as she tried to interpret the data. "The entity's energy signature has changed," Technician Moltar reported, his tentacles quivering with excitement. "It's not exhibiting any of the aggressive patterns from previous encounters. Sir, I think it's trying to communicate." General Korthak's reptilian eyes narrowed dangerously. "Communicate?" That thing destroyed 3 colonies. It turned the entire Sigma system into a graveyard. We can't trust anything it does. But Commander Vexhi was studying the readouts with growing fascination. Her species, the Zephyrians, were natural pattern recognition specialists. Their 4-dimensional thinking allowed them to perceive connections that other species missed. "General, look at these energy patterns." "They're not random. There's structure here, complexity. This isn't the behavior of a mindless predator." In Storage Bay 94, Marcus had taken another step closer to the creature. The being's massive form seemed to shift and flow like liquid shadow, but there was nothing threatening about its movements. If anything, it seemed curious about the small human who showed no fear. "I'm Marcus," the human said, gesturing to himself. "I'm a student here. I study warfare and tactics, but I think there might be more important things to learn." The creature's response was another cascade of music, but this time the harmonics included frequencies that Marcus could feel in his chest cavity. The being was incorporating human physiological resonances into its communication, adapting its method of expression to match Marcus's auditory capabilities. Marcus sat down cross-legged on the storage bay floor, making himself smaller and less threatening. "You're not a weapon, are you? You're an artist. Someone made a mistake." What happened next would be remembered in xenobiological textbooks for centuries. The creature's form began to shift, becoming less chaotic and more defined. Appendages that had seemed random and threatening revealed themselves to be incredibly sophisticated manipulator organs, each one capable of independent fine motor control. The being was literally reshaping itself to appear less intimidating. In Training Hall 7, the other students were experiencing the gravitational harmonics as subtle emotional shifts. Zarani, the telepathic Aldebarian, had tears streaming down her blue cheeks. "It's so lonely," she whispered to her companions. It's been alone for so long that it forgot how to be anything else. The revelation was spreading through the telepathic networks that connected many of the Academy's alien species. What they had been told was a containment breach was actually first contact with a form of intelligence unlike anything in their databases. Back in the command center, Commander Vexhi made a decision that would define her career. "Stand down the emergency containment charges. I'm authorizing a communication protocol." General Korthak spun toward her, his claws extending. "Commander, that creature is classified as a Class Omega threat. You don't have the authority to—" "I have command of this academy." Vexhi interrupted. her forearms moving with deadly precision as she secured the containment systems. And I'm classifying this as a first contact situation, not a security breach. The political implications would be staggering. If the creature was indeed sentient, if it had been imprisoned for 3 years without trial or communication attempts, then the Academy had committed one of the greatest atrocities in galactic history. In Storage Bay 94, Marcus and the creature had established a rudimentary form of communication. The being would play musical phrases on the piano, and Marcus would respond with simple melodies of his own. The human's limited musical ability was more than compensated for by his willingness to engage without fear. "You understand rhythm," Marcus observed, watching as the creature's appendages found complex polyrhythmic patterns on the keyboard. "Your species must have some concept of time and pattern. Music is mathematics made audible." The creature's response was a cascading series of notes that seemed to describe the rotation of galaxies, the orbital mechanics of solar systems, the precise mathematical relationships that governed stellar formation. Marcus was listening to a being that understood the universe as a vast, interconnected symphony. But there was something else in the music, something that made Marcus's heart ache with recognition. Beneath the cosmic grandeur was the simple, desperate desire for companionship that every sentient being carried within them. "You're not from anywhere, are you?" Marcus asked quietly. "Your species, you live in the empty spaces between stars. You never developed planets or cities or communities. You've always been alone." The music that followed was the saddest thing Marcus had ever heard. It spoke of a species that had achieved consciousness in the vast emptiness of interstellar space, beings so rare and so scattered that they might go millennia without encountering another of their kind. They had evolved to be self-sufficient, to find sustenance in cosmic radiation and stellar wind, but they had never evolved the social structures that other species took for granted. When this particular being had encountered the colonies in the Sigma system, it hadn't been attacking. It had been trying to communicate with what it thought were other forms of consciousness. Its attempts at contact had been interpreted as hostility, and the resulting panic had led to the destruction it was now blamed for. Marcus stood up slowly, his mind racing with the implications. "They're going to want to destroy you," he said. "The commanders upstairs, they think you're a weapon. They don't understand that you're just lost." The creature's response was a single pure note that seemed to contain all the loneliness of the universe. And then, to Marcus's amazement, it began to play a simple human melody, "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." Somehow, in its brief contact with human culture through the Academy's databases, it had learned one of humanity's most basic musical expressions. Marcus smiled, and for the first time since the emergency began, he felt hope. "I think," he said, "we need to teach them about music." The breakthrough came when Marcus began humming. The simple human melody carried through the storage bay's atmosphere caused an immediate response from the creature. Its gravitational field fluctuations synchronized with the tune, creating harmonics that transformed the entire space into a resonance chamber. "You can hear it differently than I can," Marcus realized, continuing to hum while the creature accompanied him with subtle manipulations of space-time itself. "You're not just making music with the piano. You're making music with physics." The implications staggered him. This being didn't just understand music as organized sound. It experienced it as a fundamental force of the universe, something akin to gravity or electromagnetism. When it played, it wasn't just striking keys. It was literally composing with the fabric of reality itself. In the command center, the sensor readings had evolved beyond anything in their databases. Technician Moltar's 6 eyes were wide with amazement as he reported to Commander Vexhai. "Sir, the gravitational harmonics are creating stable microfields throughout the lower level. It's not destabilizing the structure, it's actually reinforcing it." Commander Vexhai studied the data streams with growing fascination. Her species' 4-dimensional perception allowed her to see patterns that others missed, and what she was seeing challenged everything they thought they knew about physics. It's using controlled gravitational lensing to focus acoustic waves. The creature isn't just making music, it's conducting a symphony with space and time. General Korthak's reptilian features twisted with frustration. "Commander, regardless of what it's doing, that thing is still classified as a galactic threat. The Sigma colonies. Were a misunderstanding. Vexhai interrupted, pieces of a larger puzzle falling into place in her mind. Look at the energy signatures, General. This being uses gravitational manipulation as its primary form of communication. When it encountered the Sigma colonies, it was trying to make contact the only way it knew how. The political ramifications were staggering. If the commander was correct, then the galactic military had imprisoned an innocent being for 3 years, based on a fundamental misunderstanding of its intentions. In Storage Bay 94, Marcus had discovered something remarkable about human physiology that even he hadn't known. When he hummed or sang, his vocal cords created sympathetic vibrations in his chest cavity that the creature could detect and respond to. The being was using these micro-vibrations as a template for its gravitational compositions, essentially learning to speak human through music. "This is incredible," Marcus whispered, watching as the creature's appendages moved across the piano keys with increasing sophistication. "You're not just copying human music. You're creating hybrid compositions that work for both our species." The creature's response was a melody that began with simple human harmonies, but evolved into something far more complex, incorporating gravitational resonances that Marcus could feel in his bones. It was music that existed simultaneously in acoustic and gravitational spectrums, designed to be appreciated by beings with radically different sensory capabilities. Meanwhile, throughout the Academy, something unprecedented was happening. The telepathic networks that connected many of the alien species were carrying emotional resonances from the music in Storage Bay 94. Students and faculty who had never heard the creature's compositions were nonetheless experiencing their emotional content through psychic channels. In Training Hall 7, Zorani was serving as an involuntary translator for her classmates. "It's trying to tell us something," she said, her telepathic abilities allowing her to interpret the emotional subtext of the distant music. "It's showing us how it sees the universe. Everything is connected. Everything has rhythm and harmony. Stars, planets, life itself. It's all part of a vast cosmic symphony." The Aquarian student named Fluxhai rippled his tentacles in recognition. "My species has legends about the deep singers, beings that exist in the spaces between worlds and compose the music that holds reality together. We thought they were myths, but they weren't myths. They were members of an ancient species that had evolved in the emptiness between stars, developing the ability to perceive and manipulate the fundamental forces that governed cosmic structure. They were living embodiments of the mathematical principles that kept galaxies from flying apart and stars from collapsing into themselves." In the command center, more pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. Commander Vexhai had access to classified archaeological reports from the Sigma system, documents that painted a very different picture of what had happened there. "General," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger, "I'm reviewing the original incident reports from Sigma. The colonies weren't destroyed by the creature. They were destroyed by our response to the creature." General Korthak's claws scraped against his armor. "That's impossible. The thing was classified as hostile based on gravitational anomalies that disrupted the colony's orbital mechanics," Vexhai continued, reading from the classified files. "Anomalies that began as subtle harmonics and only became destructive when we opened fire with gravitational weapons. We turned a peaceful contact attempt into a space-time disaster." The truth was worse than she had imagined. The creature had approached the Sigma colonies while composing what could only be described as a gravitational greeting song. The colonists, lacking any frame of reference for this type of communication, had interpreted the approaching space-time distortions as an attack. Their defensive responses had amplified the gravitational harmonics into a resonance cascade that tore the entire system apart. The being they had captured wasn't a monster. It was a refugee, possibly the only survivor of a catastrophic misunderstanding that had destroyed its attempt at first contact. Back in Storage Bay 94, Marcus had made another breakthrough. He had discovered that the creature could understand spoken language when it was combined with musical elements. By singing his words rather than speaking them, he could communicate complex ideas that pure music couldn't convey. "Can you show me?" Marcus sang in a simple melody. What your home is like? The creature's response transformed the entire storage bay into something approaching a holographic display. Its gravitational manipulations bent light and sound to create a three-dimensional representation of deep space as seen through its senses. Stars weren't just points of light. They were sources of musical harmony, each one contributing its own note to a galactic composition that had been playing for billions of years. Marcus saw how the creature's species experienced reality as a vast, interconnected web of gravitational relationships. Planets orbited in rhythm, stellar winds carried melodies across light years, and the expansion of the universe itself provided the underlying tempo for a cosmic symphony that never ended. "You're musicians," Marcus breathed in recognition. "Your entire species, you're cosmic musicians. You don't build cities or technologies because you don't need them. The universe itself is your instrument." The creature's next composition was filled with joy, the first truly positive emotion Marcus had detected from it since their encounter began. The being was experiencing the profound relief of finally being understood by another consciousness. But their moment of connection was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor outside Storage Bay 94. Heavy boots and the mechanical whir of powered armor announced the arrival of the Academy's security forces, led by personnel who still believed they were dealing with a hostile entity. Marcus looked up at the creature, seeing what might have been concern in its shifting, shadow-like features. "They're coming," he said quietly. "And they're still afraid of you." The creature's response was a gentle melody that seemed to say it understood. But instead of preparing for conflict, it did something that Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. The massive being, capable of manipulating the fundamental forces of reality, slowly positioned itself between Marcus and the approaching security team. It was protecting him. In the command center, Commander Vexhai was racing against time to prevent a tragedy. "All security teams, stand down. This is not a hostile situation. Repeat, the entity is not hostile." But her orders were too late. Viewer, security teams had already breached the outer perimeter of Storage Bay 94. Their weapons trained on the creature that had spent the last hour composing the most beautiful music the galaxy had ever heard. Security Chief Brakthar burst through the entrance to Storage Bay 94 with a squad of heavily armed personnel, their weapons charged and ready. The massive Corthanian warrior had survived 3 galactic conflicts and earned his position through decisive action in crisis situations. He was prepared for battle with a creature that had allegedly destroyed entire star systems. He was not prepared for what he actually found. The entity stood protectively over a human student who was sitting calmly on the floor beside an old piano. Instead of the aggressive posture Brakthar expected from a cornered predator, the creature's form had configured itself into what could only be described as a defensive shield around the young man. Its shadowy appendages were spread wide, but not in threat, in protection. "Stand down." Brakthar barked at his team, his warrior instincts recognizing the difference between predatory and protective behavior. His 4 years of combat experience had taught him to read body language across dozens of species, and everything about the creature's posture said it was guarding rather than hunting. Marcus looked up at the security chief with relief. "Thank you for not shooting first," he said, slowly getting to his feet. "I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding." The creature's response to the arrival of armed personnel was unlike anything in the Academy's behavioral databases. Instead of aggression or fear, it began to produce a complex musical composition that incorporated defensive harmonics. The gravitational fields around the security team's weapons began to fluctuate, not disabling them but making them less efficient, a subtle warning that violence would be counterproductive. "What in the 7 hells is that thing doing?" demanded Sergeant Velix, a crystalline whose natural mineral structure made her sensitive to gravitational changes. Marcus stepped forward carefully, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "It's trying to communicate. Chief Brakthar, this being isn't a weapon or a monster. It's an artist. Its species uses gravitational harmonics to express emotions and ideas. When it encountered the Sigma colonies, it was trying to make first contact through music." The implications hit Brakthar like a plasma bolt to the chest. He had read the classified reports from Sigma, had seen the aftermath of what they had believed was an unprovoked attack. If the human was correct, then the entire galactic military had made a catastrophic error in judgment. "Explain," Brakthar ordered, his weapon still trained on the creature but his finger moving away from the trigger. Marcus gestured toward the piano. "Watch and listen." The creature, sensing the reduced hostility from the security team, began to play. But this wasn't the complex cosmic symphony it had shared with Marcus earlier. This was something simpler, more accessible. A melody that any species with auditory capabilities could appreciate, combined with gravitational harmonics that conveyed pure emotional content. The music spoke of loneliness stretching across geological timescales, of a species so rare that individuals might travel for centuries without encountering another of their kind. It told the story of a being that had detected the electromagnetic signatures of advanced civilization in the Sigma system and had approached with the only greeting it knew how to give. A gravitational song of peace and welcome. Sergeant Velix lowered her weapon first. As a crystalline, her mineral structure resonated with the gravitational harmonics in ways that allowed her to perceive the music's emotional content directly. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her crystal facets catching the emergency lighting as they vibrated in sympathy with the creature's composition. The other security personnel followed suit, their various species' sensory capabilities allowing them to experience different aspects of the same musical message. The Aquarian tentacles quivered with recognition. The gaseous ethereals dimmed and brightened in rhythm with the melody, and even the stoic metallic constructs registered harmonic resonances in their behavioral matrices. In the command center 3 levels above, Commander Vexai was monitoring the situation through multiple sensor arrays. "All units report status," she commanded through the communication network. Brakthar's voice came through with a tone she had never heard from the veteran security chief. Wonder. "Commander, you need to see this. The entity it's giving us a concert." The music flowing from Storage Bay 94 was being transmitted throughout the Academy via the structural resonance of the building itself. In Training Hall 7, the students who had been cowering behind energy barriers were now sitting in fascinated silence, listening to something that transcended all cultural and species boundaries. Serani, the telepathic Aldebaran, was serving as an interpreter for the emotional content of the music. "It's showing us how it sees relationship," she explained to her classmates. "Not just between individuals, but between stars, planets, entire galactic clusters. Everything is connected through gravitational harmonies that create patterns of meaning." The Klaxon insectoid hive mind clicked his mandibles in recognition. "My species has collective consciousness through pheromone networks. This being has individual consciousness that can perceive collective patterns in space-time itself. It's like having a conversation with the universe." But the most profound reaction came from an unexpected source. In the Academy's medical bay, Dr. Helixon was monitoring the vital signs of all personnel exposed to the creature's gravitational harmonics. What she discovered would revolutionize xenobiological medicine. "Commander," she reported through the communication network, "the gravitational fields are having measurable positive effects on cellular regeneration across multiple species. The harmonics are actually accelerating healing processes and reducing stress indicators. This isn't just music, it's therapeutic." The revelation added another layer to the growing understanding of what they were dealing with. The creature's species didn't just communicate through gravitational music, they potentially had healing abilities that worked across species barriers. In Storage Bay 94, Marcus had made another breakthrough. He had discovered that the creature could modulate its communications to match the cognitive patterns of different species. When it played for him, the music incorporated rhythms that matched human neural frequencies. When it addressed the security team, it adjusted the harmonics to accommodate the various alien physiologies present. "It's adapting its music to match our thought patterns," Marcus explained to Brakthar. "It's not just trying to communicate with us, it's learning how we think so it can communicate more effectively." The creature's next composition proved Marcus's point. It began with simple melodies that any species could appreciate, then evolved into complex, multi-layered harmonies that addressed each listener in their own cognitive language. The Aquarians heard flowing, liquid-like progressions that matched their aquatic nature. The crystallines experienced geometric harmonic structures that resonated with their mineral consciousness. The gaseous ethereals perceived energy patterns that spoke to their non-corporeal existence. It was a musical translation matrix, a form of universal communication that bridged the gaps between radically different forms of consciousness. But the most remarkable moment came when the creature began to incorporate elements from the Academy's own cultural database. It had somehow accessed the musical traditions of dozens of galactic civilizations and was weaving them together into a unified composition that celebrated the diversity of sapient life. Human classical music flowed seamlessly into Zephyrian quantum harmonics. Corthanian war chants merged with Aldebarian telepathic melodies. The creature was creating a galactic anthem, a musical representation of what the Academy itself was supposed to represent: different species learning to work together. Commander. Vexhi's voice crackled through the communication network with barely controlled excitement. All personnel maintain positions. I'm authorizing a full cultural exchange protocol. This is no longer a security situation. It's a diplomatic one. But even as the commander spoke, alarms began sounding throughout the Academy. New contacts were appearing on the long-range sensors, massive objects moving through hyperspace toward Kepler 442b. The creature's music had been transmitted into space through the Academy's communication arrays, and something was responding to the signal. Marcus looked up at the creature, seeing what might have been anticipation in its shifting, shadow-like features. Are those friends of yours? The creature's musical response carried a joy so profound that everyone in Storage Bay 94 could feel it regardless of their species. After centuries of isolation, after being hunted and imprisoned and misunderstood, the cosmic musician was no longer alone. The deep singers were coming home. The hyperspace contacts materialized into real space with a grace that defied conventional physics. 3 massive forms emerged from the quantum foam, each one unique in configuration but unmistakably related to the being in Storage Bay 94. They moved through space without visible propulsion, riding gravitational currents like cosmic surfers on waves of curved spacetime. In the Academy's command center, every sensor array was overloaded with readings that bordered on the impossible. Commander Vexhi's forehands moved frantically across control panels as she tried to process what they were seeing. Analysis. Technician Moltar, she ordered, her voice steady despite the unprecedented situation. Sir, the entities are generating controlled gravitational fields that allow them to manipulate local spacetime. They're not using conventional propulsion. They're literally riding the curvature of the universe itself. On the main display, the 3 beings took positions around Kepler 442b in a perfect triangular formation, but instead of approaching threateningly, they began to sing. The harmony that emerged was beyond anything the galaxy had ever experienced. 3 deep singers, separated for unknown periods of time, were reuniting through a gravitational symphony that used the entire star system as their instrument. Planets shifted slightly in their orbits to better resonate with the cosmic music. The star itself pulsed in rhythm, its fusion reactions synchronizing with gravitational beats that spanned light minutes. In Storage Bay 94, the captured deep singer was experiencing emotions that had no equivalent in any galactic language database. Its music soared with reunion joy, but underneath ran currents of profound sadness for the years, lost to imprisonment and misunderstanding. Marcus Chen, still standing beside the being that had become his unlikely friend, felt tears streaming down his face. The emotional content of the music was so powerful that it transcended species barriers. Speaking directly to the universal experiences of loneliness, hope, and connection. They came for you, Marcus said softly. They never gave up looking. The creature's response was a gentle melody that seemed to say it had never doubted they would come. But there was something else in the music, a theme that Marcus was beginning to recognize as gratitude directed toward him. Security Chief Brack. Thayer was coordinating with the command center while keeping his team positioned defensively around the storage bay, but their weapons remained lowered. It was clear that they were witnessing something historic rather than threatening. Commander, Brakthar reported through his communicator. The entity down here is responding to the external contacts with what can only be described as joy. Whatever these things are, they're definitely not hostile. Commander Vexhi was reaching the same conclusion through her analysis of the sensor data. The gravitational harmonies being generated by the 4 deep singers were creating beneficial effects throughout the star system. Asteroid fields were settling into more stable orbits. Dangerous space debris was being swept away by controlled gravitational currents. And even the Academy's own structural integrity was being enhanced by harmonic resonances. "General Korthak," she said, turning to address her superior officer, "I'm recommending that we classify this as a first contact situation rather than a security breach. These beings pose no threat to the Academy or the system." General Korthak's reptilian features were twisted, with the kind of bureaucratic panic that came with realizing that years of policy had been based on fundamental misunderstandings. "Commander, if these creatures are truly sentient, if we've been holding one prisoner for 3 years, then we've committed one of the greatest diplomatic disasters in galactic history," Vexhai finished grimly, "but we have a chance to correct it." The opportunity for redemption came sooner than expected. The 3 deep singers in orbit began to modulate their gravitational harmony to include frequencies that the Academy's communication systems could detect and interpret. They were learning to speak in electromagnetic signals, adapting their natural gravitational communication to match the technology used by the galactic community. The first translated message was simple. "Our friend." Where? Commander Vexhai made a decision that would define the rest of her career. She opened a direct communication channel to the orbital deep singers and included the gravitational harmonics being generated in Storage Bay 94. "Your friend is here," she transmitted. "Safe. Learning to communicate with us as we learn to communicate with you." The response from orbit was a cascade of gravitational harmonies so complex that it took the Academy's computer several minutes to process the emotional content. Joy, relief, gratitude, and something else. An offer of exchange. Down in Storage Bay 94, the captured deep singer was translating the orbital communication for Marcus and the security team. Its music told a story of species that had traveled the galaxy for eons, maintaining the gravitational harmonies that kept star systems stable and cosmic structures intact. They were gardeners of spacetime, musicians whose songs literally held the universe together. "They're offering to teach us," Marcus realized, listening to the creature's musical translation. Not just their communication methods, but their understanding of how gravity and harmony interact. They want to share their knowledge of cosmic engineering. The implications were staggering. The deep singers possessed scientific knowledge that could revolutionize galactic civilization. Their understanding of gravitational manipulation could lead to faster-than-light travel without hyperspace. Terraforming techniques that used harmonic resonance to stabilize planetary environments, and energy generation methods that tapped into the fundamental forces of the universe. But more than that, they offered something the galaxy desperately needed, a form of communication that transcended species barriers, that spoke directly to the emotional and spiritual experiences shared by all conscious beings. As if to demonstrate this point, the deep singer in Storage Bay 94 began a new composition. This one incorporated musical elements from every species represented in the Academy, weaving them together into a harmony that celebrated the diversity of sapient life while emphasizing the underlying connections that united all consciousness. Students throughout the Academy stopped what they were doing to listen. In Training Hall 7, beings who had been trained to see others as potential enemies found themselves moved to tears by music that spoke of universal brotherhood. Telepathic networks carried the emotional content to species who couldn't hear the acoustic elements, while gravitational sensitives experienced the full cosmic scope of the composition. For the first time in galactic history, representatives of dozens of species were sharing a truly universal artistic experience. Marcus looked around Storage Bay 94, seeing the wonder on the faces of hardened security personnel as they experienced something that transcended all their training and preconceptions. The terror beast they had come to contain was curled peacefully beside the old piano, its massive form somehow managing to look both powerful and gentle, as it shared its gift with beings who had finally learned to listen. Commander Vexhai's voice crackled through the communication system with barely contained excitement. "All personnel prepare for expanded first contact protocols. We're about to learn more about the universe than we ever imagined possible." But the most profound moment came when the deep singer began to teach Marcus how to play gravitational harmonies himself. Using techniques that worked with human physiology, The being showed him how to create sympathetic vibrations that could be detected by gravitational sensors throughout the academy. Marcus Chen, human exchange student and inadvertent diplomat, became the first member of his species to compose music with the fundamental forces of the universe. His simple melodies, amplified and enhanced by the deep singer's gravitational mastery, carried messages of friendship and wonder to beings in orbit who had traveled between the stars for longer than human civilization had existed. As the Academy's emergency lights finally switched to normal illumination, as alarm systems fell silent and crisis protocols transitioned to diplomatic procedures, one thing became clear to everyone involved. They had been calling it a terror beast, but it had been trying to teach them how to sing with the cosmos all along. And now finally the galaxy was ready to learn. The age of the deep singers had begun, and humanity had played a crucial role in opening the door to a universe far more musical and interconnected than anyone had ever dared to imagine. The terror beast had become a teacher, the human had become a bridge between worlds, and the Academy had become the birthplace of a new era in galactic civilization. In the end, the greatest weapon in the universe turned out to be the willingness to listen without fear, to approach the unknown with curiosity rather than aggression, and to recognize that sometimes the most alien beings shared the most fundamental desires for connection and understanding.